The Bully Girl Magazine podcast is your dog-eared audio destination, bookmarking the most compelling tales and insights from the vast canine universe. While we passionately dive into the world of bully breeds, dispelling myths, offering training tips, and discussing breed standards, our scope isn't limited. We cast our net wide to encompass a diverse range of dog breeds, ensuring no tale is left untold. Enhanced by expert interviews and inspiring stories, this podcast is a beacon for responsible ownership and breed education. It's where bully breed enthusiasts meet the broader dog-loving community, fostering unity, understanding, and shared joy in every bark and wag. So whether you're out walking your dog or listening at home, be sure to enjoy the show and keep coming back. I'm Lisa Davis, and I'm so happy that you're listening to the Bully Girl Magazine podcast. Now, for those of you who came over from Dog Eared, just know that I'm still going to be doing a few author interviews a month, and we're going to be talking to fantastic bully breed rescues. We're going to be talking about people in the magazine who are doing great things in the bully world, veterinarians, and so much more. And today is an episode where I'm interviewing a fantastic author, Rick Crandall, and I am in love with his book. This book is so good. Oh my gosh, it's The Dog Who Took Me Up a Mountain, How Emme the Australian Terrier Changed My Life When I Needed It Most. Rick, welcome to the Bully Girl Magazine podcast.
Well, glad to be here.
It's so great to have you on. So I love in the preface you write, I would go on to climb every mountain, maybe I'm giving too much away, over 14,000 feet in the Rocky Mountains, all 58 of them. And you didn't climb your first one until you were 64. You really express in the book how you were going through a really hard time in your career. Talk to us about that and that how amazing dogs are and how much they change our lives and how much they changed yours.
Well, even though we're, 23 years later from when the tech bust happened, the dot-com bust occurred, my whole background is tech. Tech as a CEO, as board members, and a bunch of other positions. And my financial portfolio was pretty much technology. And that got crushed in 2001. It was at that time that I'd always have dogs my whole life. I didn't at that moment because I had just moved to Aspen. So it seemed like getting a dog would be the right kind of companion to have, while my own emotionality got through the whole issues of that tech bust.
You know, I forgot to ask. Oh, I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, and we can edit this, but I forgot to ask. There's two questions that I ask every person who comes on the show. First of all, does your dog do anything unusual? Although with Emme, I'm thinking, yes, climbs mountains, but does your dog do anything like spin 3 times before you feed her or him, or bring something to the door every time? Or is there something cute, unusual, interesting that Emme does?
Well, cute, I'm not sure if it's unusual, but when we would get out in the mountains, we were way above tree line. We were in rocks, gray kind of environment. There was no green. And it was a little bit hard to see her, so I would put an orange vest on her. And that vest for me was a way I could see her from at distance. But the instant I even put my hands on that vest, when it was hanging in our mudroom, she would go nuts. She would turn around and circle. She'd jump against the door. She would know there's a climb coming up. And this dog had a passion for mountain climbs that's like nothing I've ever seen.
Yeah, it was so amazing to read about that in the book. The other question is, when did your love of dogs begin?
Well, my love of dogs began all the way back when I was a child. I had a Boston Terrier at that time. It's a very smart breed. And his name was Jigs. He caught on to what we would be doing in the backyard, which was typically throwing frisbees back and forth or playing catch with a ball. And the instant anything like that went in a neighbor's yard, this was a very picky neighbor about his lawn and his shrubbery and whatever. So he didn't want any kids on it. Jigs would sneak along the bushes along the boundary between the two properties and just streak out, get the ball, streak back before almost anybody could see him. It was kind of like special forces for us as we would play our games.
Now, in the book, you talk about seasonal affective disorder and that you were in your 50s and you loved Ann Arbor. Matter of fact, my parents met in college at in Ann Arbor, University of Michigan, but you wanted to go somewhere more sunny, or you needed to. And I need to go somewhere more sunny. And I have never been to Colorado, but I would love to go. Tell us what it's been like for you.
Oh my God, you've never been to Colorado, at least to visit.
No, so I
Um,
have to visit you.
it 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 promotes the state promotes the idea that there are 300 days per year of sunshine. What they mean is that it's either a full day or at least a piece of the day. So even when rain comes in, it's typically storm cells that are over and then the sun comes out again. For somebody like me I was actually diagnosed with seasonal affective disorder, SAD. Getting into, that much sun was really important. Colorado is different though than some of the southern states like Florida because it doesn't have the humidity. And
Oh,
even
that's
at
nice.
Denver, you're at 5,000 feet, which is a mile up. And where I live is at 8,000 feet. So you're in dry, sunny type weather, which in the summer doesn't really get colder than about 80. In the winter, it does get cold, but when the sun is out, it mutes the cold.
Yeah.
And it's a very outdoors oriented state. The people that are here really participate outdoors.
See, that's what I love. I live in an area that's a third conservation land. So even though we have a long winter, where I am, I can be out in it. And I learned how to layer because I grew up in California, and
Right.
it's really great. I mean, I'm so big on the outdoors and hiking, and that was another reason I enjoyed the book. But I want to jump into when you got Emmy. And you write that it was 6 months into your marriage with Pamela, and she said, quote, "Let's get a dog. I love animals and I can't picture my life without them." How are you feeling about that?
Uh, well, at the time, I was so distracted with how to regain some of the lost financials
Yeah.
that I was willing to go with anything. Sure, let's get a dog. And it's I wasn't thinking as much about it then. I'd had, I'd say 5 different breeds in my lifetime up until that point. And so Pamela picked Australian Terrier as the breed. I wasn't really familiar with the breed. And of course, I got very familiar with it.
Yeah, I had never even heard about it. I love that you write Pamela did a lot of research, and the reason she decided on the Australian Terrier is this was her criteria: no yapping, no shedding, fits in carriers under seats of airplanes, enjoys outdoor activities.
That's exactly correct.
That's awesome. I know. I wish I could shrink my pit bull Blue and just carry him around with me. I love him so much. You also write, quote, within a short time, she began to display the personality traits I can best describe as a Rottweiler with ADD. So when you got Emmy, you're like, wait a second, what's going on here?
It was very clear that she had a type A type personality right from the start, even when she was a pup.
Yeah.
And she was in control. Her job was to parole the house, look out the windows to see if there was a bear to bark at, which occasionally we would see.
Yeah.
Uh, or and she also, her job was it seemed like she took an attachment to me. And when I would had to go out of town on a 2-day business trip, when I would come back, it was very clear she was mad at me for a while because I was away for 2 days, and then
Right.
we would befriend again.
Oh, that's good. You actually talk about Emmy and a big black bear in your yard.
Uh, the there were times when it could have been a bear one time, or a fox or whatever. But she ran outside before we knew what was going on. And that bear, by the way, was not the only one. There were 2 others that might have been her kids, but somewhat grown up.
Wow.
And she ran around barking and yelling at these bears, and they went up in a tree. She literally treed 3 bears.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
These are
Everyone has to
black
stay
bears,
tuned because we're going to
which
talk
are
about bulls soon, but we'll save that.
yeah, these are black bears, which are less dangerous than
Oh,
grizzly
okay.
bears and the things you find further up north.
Oh, okay. Now, one of the things that I really admired when I read the book is you talk about your experience with Emmy in the dog shows, and you write, quote, her body language and facial expressions at dog shows range from begrudging acceptance, but I'm going to re-say this, I apologize. So you talk about Emmy at the dog shows, and you basically are saying you could tell from her facial expressions that she really wasn't into it and that she was ready to just bolt for the door. And I thought it was great that you listened. And you didn't make her go to dog shows when she didn't want to.
No, we tried it. She was a very good example of her breed. So she did win, which was very motivating to Pamela, who kind of wanted to continue with dog shows. But it was so much difficulty, even grooming her. She just didn't want to stand on the table. She wanted to go outside.
Yeah.
and even did bolt for the doors once. And there's a, like in golf when you say four because a ball's gonna come.
Yeah.
Well, dog people have something they yell out when a dog is running for the door, so that everybody goes to try to catch the dog. You could not catch her, and it's that was just the way she was. But it was very clear she did not want to do dog shows, even though she was of the quality to be in a dog show.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you decided to bring her to a breeder in Martinez, California, so Emmy could get pregnant. And I love the way you write that Emmy was old school in her approach to motherhood. Talk to us about that.
By old school, I mean that it was hard love.
Right.
Uh, she took care of her puppies. She had five, but it wasn't like she was coddling them at all. And even when we would go on hikes, as they were capable of going on hikes, we'd be in a hilly area, and she would
Right.
scramble up a hill that was a bit difficult to get up, probably knowing that they were going to try to follow her. And of course, they failed several times and tumbled down. But eventually, they got skilled at it as well.
Oh, that's good. One of the things I love reading about as well, and I definitely want to do this, I love Vermont, is Camp Gone to the Dogs. You're in the Green Mountains of Vermont with over 200 dogs, and you write at least as many dog obsessed humans. Tell us about your experience there, the canine freestyle, the dancing, the fun, the dogs.
Well, the experience there would be super fun for a completely dedicated dog person. For me, I enjoyed some of the activities. I could describe a few of them, but there was so much going on there that it was a bit over the top for me.
Oh,
So I would be the one to go out to the Starbucks that was down the road and get the coffees for everybody who was working with their dogs. Yes, it teaches how to dance with your dogs. That actually is successful. The coolest thing for a dog that's really energetic and physical is they have a device called a lure course, which
mm.
is a big piece of lawn or of property with a rope that is stretched about a foot off the ground in a huge square, and that's on a pulley, and the tied to it is a piece of rag that kind of looks like an animal,
Oh, yeah.
and they would pull that rag around this huge square just faster than the dog could run, and you would see dogs stretched out, just as fast as they could possibly go, and it was just one of the things that was super fun.
Oh, that seems really fun. But where the real fun is for Emmy is hiking. And she really found her way. There was something that you write, and it's a little bit long, but I have to read it because I think it's so great. You talk about a hike on your birthday in 2006, and you write, when we got into the car, Emmy jumped onto her spot on the armrest and just looked triumphant. She looked at me, and right then I knew exactly what she was communicating. Hey, you finally figured it out. This is my purpose. It is what I want to do. And you are going to do it, and you are going to do it with me. At that moment, I knew we were onto something. That I was 63 years old, I became serious about mountain climbing. It wasn't an issue of concern for it was an issue of concern for my friends more than it was for me. Our experience of reaching the summit of Mountain Boy felt like I had reached the point in a journey that was only just beginning. That's huge. What a feeling. Take us back to that.
Well, just prior to that, we would do hikes. Everybody hikes around the Aspen area. But wherever we would hike, Emmy would always go to the highest point, whether it was on the top of a log or on the top of a rock or the top of a mound or whatever it was. And so I kept going higher and she kept going higher. It was something that she wanted to do. It was though she got to the high point and looked back at me to say, come on, this is where we're supposed to be. That's why I even chose that mountain called Mountain Boy, which is at 13,500 feet, to even
Wow.
attempt to get up to the summit. When we did, she did. She stood on the pile of rocks that's always at the top of the summit that is called a cairn. And she just looked around in kind of a 360 view as though she was a human. I was just wondering, what is it she's thinking? Is she really saying to herself, "Oh, how beautiful"? I didn't know what, but it was very clear to her that she got to where she wanted to be, and so we just started mountain climbing.
Oh, see, I think that's wonderful. And, you talked about having to dramatically improve your fitness. You were reading labels or you weren't eating packaged foods. You cut out sugar. You lost 25 pounds because you weren't going to let, age stop you or, being heavier stop you. Talk to us about this and what was that like?
My brain kind of works in a problem-solving mode, always has, and that's when you're in business. Certainly, when you're in tech, you
Right.
probably that needs to be part of your personality. And there was one hike, very long hike, 8.5 miles up 3,000 feet. I had a big pack on, and I didn't make it. I had to turn around. It just was too wearing on me. On the way down is when my brain sort of was in automatic mode, saying, maybe this is a problem that I can solve. Maybe if I lose weight, maybe if I pay attention to a couple things, if I get a bit more fit, maybe I can get up these. And that's what the whole next winter was all about. As you say, cutting out the
Yeah.
white stuff, which to me is
Yep.
sugar and desserts and all that kind of thing, and getting my weight down.
Yeah, that's huge. And it shows how committed you are to doing what you really want to do. You talk about another story where you were hiking with your son, Brett, and he continued on. You'd already been hiking for 7 hours and you started feeling pretty badly. Tell us about this.
We had gone up to a 14,000-foot mountain called Mount Yale
Mm.
that is in Buena Vista, not far from Aspen. And it was a long trek. This was when I was still heavier
Ah,
and
yes.
less fit. And I did get to summit on that one, but I had used up so much by doing it. And he was with me. We started heading down, and I was really going slow. So my son, who was, of course, much younger and fit, he said, the path is clear now, so I'm just going to go down to the bottom and wait for you, which he did.
Yeah.
At that point, I didn't even know if I could make it all the way. I just wanted a helicopter to come and pick me up and get me out of there.
Wow.
But, what I did is what often we do sometimes in business or in personal life to take a big problem, which was how to get back to the trailhead, and break it down
Yeah.
into smaller pieces. So I just kept saying to myself, I see a rock 100 feet down. If I can just get to that, I'll be okay. And I'd
Mm.
get to that rock, and then I would pick a tree, and then I would pick some other. And it's interesting. Emmy sort of knew what I was doing. She would go first to a place and then turn around and wait for me, and then we would make it all the way down to the bottom eventually. But that was tough. That was just before I needed to realize I was going to have to get more fit and get lesser weight to really do these mountains.
And you had some other challenges too before you were hiking the really high altitudes. Something happened with deep snow at Maroon Creek and the stinging porcupine.
Well, that's so. I was hiking with a friend who was a doctor, as it turns out. That's meaningful because he had two dogs, and I had Emmy, and we were hiking up. They looked over the side down a very steep slope. This was in the winter, very deep, soft snow, and Emmy saw something, and so she jumped off the side and started
Ah,
plowing down. As well did his two dogs. And when they got down to the bottom, which was where there was a river, there was something going on in a bush, and we couldn't see what it was. His two dogs jumped into the bush. It turns out there was
oh,
a porcupine in there. We saw it was so steep. We knew there was no way they were going to get back up, especially in about 3 or 4 feet worth of deep of loose snow. So both he and I started heading down this slope. And by the time he got to the bottom, he saw that his two dogs had really gotten into it with this porcupine.
oh,
They were loaded with quills. Before I knew it was a porcupine, I just saw Emmy was standing back. She didn't dive into the bush. Normally, she'd be the first one in, and she didn't that time.
mm,
He got down, and I stayed about halfway down the slope. He started fighting his way back up with one of his dogs and eventually kind of threw them up to me. When I got a hold of the one dog, must have had 50 spines sticking out. I tried pulling one or two out, but there was just too many. They were all in his face. They were all over. It was really bad. And so I pushed that dog all the way up to the top to his wife, who was waiting for us at the road. He sent the next one up, was even worse.
ah.
Then he sent Emmy up. Emmy had two.
Oh my
She
gosh.
had never gone
Wow.
into the bush.
Thank
And
goodness.
and and she wanted him out clearly because when she got to me, we were still halfway up this slope. She just stared at me, and there was one that was poking out of her jowl, and one that was poking up just above her eye.
Oh,
The only way to get a porcupine spine out is you have to grab it by the base and pull straight out. Because if you pull any which way, it's going to break off, and a piece is going to stay within. It's got an end that's like a fish hook
oh
and will
gosh.
work its way in. And so she just let me just grab it in the beginning and yank out. I didn't even hear a yelp from her. And then she kept staring at me like, well, I got one more. So I pulled that one out, and then she was fine. We went back up the hill. The others had to go to the vet, had to get not put to sleep, but had to get put out with anesthesia.
Right.
And my friend, the doctor, as well as the vet, just both worked on getting all these spines out of those dogs.
Didn't you say it took like 6 months or something? Or 6 weeks?
Because some of the spines already had broken off and were inside, and they can work their way out over months, which happened. And so 5 times he had to return to the vet to get these spines taken out, pieces of these spines taken out. I would recommend to anybody who's going on a significant hike with a dog, bring one of the all-purpose knives that have a pliers in it,
Yeah.
because if there's fewer spines, you can pull them out with those pliers. But if there isn't, you got to get them to a vet.
It is so scary. I mean, my dogs, not the two I have now, but I have the good boys, the original good boys, then I have the good boys that I have now. And the original good boys, they would disappear in the woods. They would hear something, they'd be gone. The good boys I have now, they stay close, thank goodness. The worst has happened with them is they've gotten skunked, which is a drag, but not nearly.
No,
There's no comparison. There's no
right,
comparison. I mean,
right.
it smells, but there's no comparison. Let's talk about the 14ers. Tell us what that word means for people who are like, wait, what?
So people know that the Rocky Mountains have lots of high mountains.
Yeah.
As it turns out, there are 58 of them that are over 14,000 feet, and they're called
Wow.
14ers. They are range from not too hard to you're kind of hiking up in a path or a near path. Those are called class 1, and it goes all the way up to class 5, which is technical. You're using ropes and so on. So there's the whole variety. With Emmy, I would say, well, I know she did 16 of these 14ers with me. I guess we'll get to that point in the story.
Yeah.
These are all the way
Amazing.
up to class 3, where you're doing what's called scrambling. You're using your hands, you're pulling yourself up rocks, and you would say, how can a dog that's 22 pounds and you know a smaller dog, how could get up all that? She would find cracks in the boulders. She would never once in all the 14ers she did I ever lift her once, getting all the way to summit. Other
It's
climbers would run
amazing.
into us, just couldn't believe it. She had a way of, if it was a boulder that was large, she would jump onto it and then claw her way up the rest of it. But there was no way she would let me get near her even to try to pick her up.
That's amazing. You write about looking at her paws after some of these hikes and that they looked fine. Like you think the pads would be scratched up. So it sounds like this is what she is really meant to do.
She had a way of placing her feet on the rock. There's lots of boulders you're working on, and
Right.
little rocks and scree. She had a way of placing her feet so that they never felt on a sharp edge. And because you're always concerned about with that. It's one of the reasons that, oddly enough, a smaller dog is better to get up a mountain like that than a big dog. A big
Oh,
dog is heavier and their feet are bigger, and they'll extend over more of the rock and they'll get more damage. There are some stories about some dogs getting really damaged on these mountains here.
oh, that's not good. What are some of your favorite things about being up high and climbing these mountains?
Getting above tree line.
Yeah.
So in the Rockies, tree line is at about 11,800 feet.
Wow.
It's mainly weather that kind of dictates that it's just too
Mm-hmm.
hard for
Mm-hmm.
trees to live above that. Getting above tree line is amazing because the views go on forever and they're all around you. And
Wow.
so to me, that it's so much more amazing than walking through a forest, although I'm not going to denigrate walking through forests.
Yes.
And it's Emmy seemed to have felt the same way, and she was always ahead of me. I was always concerned, is this too much for her? Because some of our hikes were 12, 14 hours.
Oh my
Uh,
gosh.
she got really strong for those. And so but she was always ahead of me. So it wasn't like she was dragging behind.
Right.
And aside from checking her paws to make sure that, she was okay, I didn't really worry about her.
You know, you share a really funny story. By the way, you have a great sense of humor in the book about your son Brett and your family friend Clayton and how they
Yeah.
went mountain climbing on the day you were getting married. And Clayton thought he knew a lot more than he did. And you know what? Maybe we should save that because I don't want to give away all the stories, but it was pretty funny or scary and funny.
Well, to even start, I'd have to tell the whole story, but it's in the book. And
Yes,
there's a lot of funny stories in the book.
there's a
There's
lot
also
of
some
fun.
amazing
Yes.
stories when it comes to Emmy's behaviors.
Yes, absolutely. Well, share some of those behaviors with us. But yes, I definitely do want people to get the book.
The one you just briefly mentioned before about running into two bull
Yeah.
cows.
Oh, yes. Thank you.
Uh, we were doing a hike out to what is called Capitol Lake out here. It was about a 5.5 mile hike out and back. And there's a path, but there's a lot of tall growth on either side of the path. And so I was with my sister, Beverly, and Emmy. We were hiking along, and we could see in the distance two bulls butting heads right across the path.
Oh my God.
And there wasn't really an easy way to get around it because there was all this growth, but we were going to have to go off and do it. We were just going to have to bushwhack, it's called,
Yeah.
getting off the path. But Emmy kept walking straight down the path at these bulls. And, I stopped for a second to see what was going on. As she got close, she did this rough. She had this, I don't know, animals have a communication. It
Right.
was a different kind. It wasn't a bark. It wasn't a growl. I can't quite describe it. Whatever it was, it caught the attention of these two bulls, and they stopped butting each other. Both heads turned towards her to see what was going on. There's this little dog in the path, and that's why I have a picture. The two bulls backed
Yep.
up like two semi trailers backing up to clear the path, and she started walking right through. And I'm going, I can't let her do that by herself. And so I
Right.
started going through. My sister, who was behind me, was completely worried about that.
Oh,
But
yeah.
there was almost no other way to go. So she got right up behind me. The two of us walked through, and as soon as we got through, the two bulls started butting heads again right across the path. It was unbelievable. She just cleared the way, and how she knew she could clear it, I have no idea.
Yeah, that's incredible. Yeah, the pictures in the book are amazing. I know I read
Mm.
that story. I was like, wait a second. If I were Beverly, I think I would have just been frozen. I would have been just scared to move. It's pretty amazing. Rick, what advice do you have for people listening who want to get out with their dogs? How do they start? Especially people who, maybe are just road walking their dogs, but they want to take a trip, or maybe they're close to woods and they haven't explored them yet. What's the best way to get started?
Well, the first thing that I would say is that if you haven't done much hiking and now you're going to go on a big hike, you're going to need to build up to it gradually.
Right.
Of course, it depends on your age. If you're in your 20s, probably don't have to do that. But if you're in your 50s or 60s, you can't do the whole thing at once. You need to build up to it. And the best way to prepare for hiking is to hike. Just hike
Yeah.
shorter ones at first and then longer ones. If you're hiking with your dog, of course, you got to pay attention to whether is it going to be crowded? There's going to be a lot of other people and dogs around. Is your dog trained to stay with you, or is it properly socialized? Because if it's not, you really need to keep it on leash.
Yeah, I agree.
So it really depends on what's your relationship with the dog and what's their behaviors when they run into other people and other dogs, because you're going to run into that on a hike. Or what's their behavior if they're going to see an animal. If they're going to run off and just keep running off and not come back, that's a problem. You need to keep that dog on leash. If they run off a bit and you know they're going to come back, that's a different story.
Yeah, it's really tricky. I mean, my lab is terrible off leash and on leash, but my pit bull Blue is great. Like he'll see other dogs in the woods and he just smells them, and I always yell, "He's friendly," which is so annoying. But that's part of what this podcast is about. Educating people about bully breeds and that they're actually sweethearts and wonderful dogs and wonderful family dogs. But whatever
Yeah, I
type
would
of breed
mention
you
I
have,
would
oh, go
mention
ahead.
I'd mention one other thing. There's
Sure.
typically a rules of the road as far as who has right of way if you're on a narrow path and there are people coming at you. If you have a dog, it doesn't matter what your normal right of way would have been. I would have just get that dog a little bit off trail, let the person pass, because some people are a little bit afraid of even of
Yes.
dogs. I can't
Yeah.
imagine it, but they are.
Yeah, no, I understand. And I think it depends where you go. There's certain places I know all the dogs are off leash, so it's fine. There's other places I know where tons of people walk and not everybody wants a
Mhm.
dog running up to them. So you have to use common sense. You have to know where you're going, right? And you
Yep.
have to be courteous of the laws. If it's a leash law, then you got to use a leash, right? So, but it sounds like with Emmy, did you have to leash her at first, like going up the mountains, or how did that work?
Never once.
I
Yeah,
didn't think so. I was like, I don't remember reading that.
I couldn't get near her to put a leash on.
Oh,
But she was so dedicated. I use the word passion a lot in the book.
Yes.
And for me, this was a passion, a new passion at an older age. For Emmy, it was though she was born with this passion. And fortunately, I discovered it. With all the things that we tried with her, it was clearly getting to summits of high places. And so she was very serious. In fact, she clearly had behaviors as though she was responsible for me. And there's some cute
Wow.
stories about that as well.
Yeah, I love how you talk about she helped with that issue of when you're hiking with other people, if they get too far ahead and you get too far behind, and she would kind of run back and forth between you. And talk to us a little bit about that and how that was helpful.
Well, she was my sentinel. First of all, I was always older than the people I was hiking with, so they were faster,
Yeah.
and we were going up. And when you're in the mountains, you can get lost 100 feet away because there are
Oh,
different
yeah.
gullies. There's all kinds of ridges, but I didn't want to hold them back. I didn't want to have that pressure on my hiking speed. I needed to go at my speed. And by that's another word of recommendation to people. If you're going to go on significant hikes, go with people who are about your level, because if you aren't, it gets to be kind of difficult. But in this particular case, they would go on ahead, and if they got out of eyesight, Emmy would run ahead to see where they were. She'd come back only far enough so she could see that I could see her up above,
Yeah.
and she would just keep doing that. She would connect us until we would get to way above tree line where things are pretty visible.
Now, for people over 50, were you doing anything for like your knees, extra exercises, or were you focusing on, how to keep your feet healthy? Or because like I have a heel spur, so I'm reading this book and I'm so jealous because I was like, I want to do this, but it hurts to walk at this point. So I do it anyway, but I have a knee situation, so I do PT exercises every day to help strengthen it. So you're not going to see me climbing any mountains, unfortunately. But if people do have some weaknesses, do you have any recommendations?
I do. The strongest recommendation that I have is to get hiking sticks.
Okay.
But it's a specific kind. And I don't work for Lecky, Leki, which is who I think is dominant in making these hiking
Yeah, I've
sticks.
heard of those.
Uh, but they have a style of stick where the top is like an L. The top is flat. It's not all straight up all the way up. And when you have your hands on top of that and you're pushing down, you have a much better angle of your arm on the stick, and you'll push down on them a little harder. That takes, according to the studies, about 20% of the work off your legs and into your upper body, which is good for your upper
Oh,
body. And
yeah.
it also is better for your knees, especially coming downhill. When you can push on those as you come downhill, or if you're on loose scree or a loose gully, or what we call marbles, little pebbles that are mixed in with the dirt, those are, you push those out in front of you and they really stabilize you, and it gives you the 4 feet that a dog has as opposed to just your own 2 feet. So that's my strongest recommendation. Get hiking sticks.
Yeah, I need to do that because even just little hills sometimes going down will affect my heel, affect my knee, and then it's so disheartening. So I think I'm definitely going to get those. Do you have any other advice for people who want to get into getting out there with their dogs?
Well, especially if it involves hiking,
Right.
again, you got to start slow
Okay.
and build up, because even if you have some of the problems that you're talking about, if you
Mm-hmm.
can build up some of the muscle that's around it,
Right.
they will take some of the pressure off of the joints. And when you're coming downhill, and to see if I can describe this verbally, you don't want to slam your feet downhill as
Okay.
you're walking forward, because that's going to hit your joints and your knees. And
Mm,
so you do what I call muscling down,
right.
which means the foot that's on the mountain, the other foot's going forward. Use the foot that's on to lower yourself down so that you step lightly in the next step and lightly in the next
Oh,
step. You will get, your quads will start burning, but
yeah.
that's okay. That's muscle.
Yeah.
But you'll take a lot of the slamming off of your joints.
Oh, that's so helpful. If it's something steep, I'll be wearing pants that it's okay if they get wet and I'll just sit down, slide down on my butt. But I would rather do it your way. The other thing too is I'm always afraid of slipping. You mentioned the stones, but like where I live in New England, there's so many trees and in the fall they all fall and it's gorgeous, but then and then it rains or it's icy and all of a sudden there's all these slipping hazards. I'm assuming the sticks are helpful with that as well.
The sticks are helpful. Staying off of exposed tree roots are helpful.
Okay.
That is the slipperiest.
Yeah,
They'll
absolutely.
feel like they have oil on them. So
Yeah.
that's not a good thing. Usually it's good to see if there's any little rocks, not pebbles, but hand-sized rocks in the path, and
Oh,
put your toe on that. So in other words, step on that, because that'll give you some stability. And look for places where it's opportunities that you can keep your foot more level and not so tilted downhill. But stay off the top of tree roots. Those are the worst.
yeah, they really are. Now, do you have any big adventures planned any hikes you want to tell us about coming up this year?
The adventures in here are really, I'm done with the 14. I climbed all 58 14ers, which I think you
That is
mentioned.
just, I don't even have the
And
word.
that, no,
Spectacular.
the more I look back on it, the more it was astonishing, because some of them are really difficult. My longest one was almost 18 hours round trip, with a lot of hand over hand, climbing up and so forth. And there's a lot of stories about some of the 14ers around here as to how
Hmm.
difficult they are, and they do kill people each summer.
Oh, wow.
So, but there are 13ers. There are mountains that are over 13,000 feet, some of which are harder than the 14ers, because
Yeah.
it depends on what the route is. There's a lot of those. So I don't have any goal of doing
Okay.
all of anything. I
Good.
just love getting out on them. Every mountain is a new experience. It's got some different kind of challenges, different views. It's all beautiful though.
You just mentioned about people can die in the summer. So I would say if you're new, you don't want to be hiking when it's crazy hot.
Well, and that's happened this summer. There's just a hiker in the Grand Canyon, just doing the one day, going down one side and up the other, but it got so hot
Oh my God, that's
that just
horrible.
died of heat. By the way, bring water,
Yes.
because you'll that's the first thing that happens is you dehydrate. And you want to take sips of water all along the way, every 15, 20 minutes, half hour, because dehydration, you can't feel it happening. And once it does happen, it's hard to reverse it.
Yeah, when I read that in the book, I thought that was so interesting because all of a sudden you're like, "Oh shoot, I'm going to drink it, I'm going to chug this water," but it's too late. What food do you bring? Especially you were saying those 18-hour hikes.
That's a whole study. And it depends who you talk to about
Well, what do
about
you
what.
personally?
So the issues are a combination of energy, and just a protein, getting enough protein into your body. If you don't get
Right.
protein into your body every couple of hours at least,
Yeah,
and maybe even every 1 hour, you're going to run out of energy. And I won't say what brands and everything else, but I
sure.
have finally found a bar that won't freeze. Which when you get that far up tree line, above tree line, you can get into some pretty cold weather, and you can break your teeth on some of these bars
I bet.
chewing on them. And it's very high protein. It's actually made out of cricket flour.
Oh, I've read about. Actually, tell us. I actually like to have brands because then it
F-
makes it easier for
flour,
people.
flour from ground, farmed crickets. People are thinking that crickets crawling around the bar. That's not it. It's just flour, and of course it's flavored. But they tend to stay soft even when they get cold, and that's pretty important. Otherwise, you're gonna hurt your teeth trying to get through some of these bars. And it's got something like, it's either 12 or 15 grams of protein per bar.
Nice.
And that kind of protein, if you're really exerting yourself, is really important. The other thing is you're going to need carbs,
Right.
whereas you might want to stay away from it, in normals, because you don't want to gain weight. Before the start of a hike, if it's going to be a significant hike, you really need some carbs. You need some fat. You need some stuff like bacon.
Oh yeah,
That'll help. The
I
interesting thing
agree.
is the turkey. Sometimes we used to have a turkey sandwich we eat for lunch. Turkey doesn't have much fat, so that's
No.
not as good. Peanut butter and jelly is terrific,
Yep.
because you're going to get some sugar. You're going to get some sugar high out of it. You're also going to get protein out of the peanut butter.
Yeah, it's really important. Actually, do tell us the brand because I want to try these cricket protein bars. Which one do
The
you like?
site the site is EXO,
EXO. Okay.
EXO.com, I think it is, and I
Okay.
don't know if that's the brand name or whatever. But I always have cricket bars.
What do they taste like? Whatever they flavor them
Well,
with?
they taste like how they're flavored.
Oh,
They
okay.
don't taste like chickens. They,
Tastes like
uh,
chicken.
they flavor them just like any other bar is flavored. So they have a cookie dough flavor, and they have a
Oh,
whatever. But and they have a consistency. It's not gooey like some bars are and so forth, but they don't freeze.
Okay, I need to try that because I'm sensitive to nuts and it's such a drag because all my favorite bars are nut based. And so I've been trying to find a protein bar that's something else. So I'm going to give those
You ought to
crickets a
look this one
try.
up.
I will. Well, Rick, was there anything else you wanted to add today? I mean, obviously, I want to get how to get the book and all about you, but anything else to our delightful conversation?
Yes, there's an underlying theme to the book. When I went to the agent and then he connected me with the publisher,
Yeah.
they said, look, as long as there's dogs in the book, we're good. And yet, in my mind, it was also about something else. What Emmy led me to was a new passion in life.
Right.
I started from that very negative period. I dug out of it financially, yes. But then what was the new passion? Everybody needs some kind of a passion. I don't care how old they are, just to get up and out of bed in the morning and to have something where they look forward to. In my case, it happened to be mountain climbing. But the point of the book, the underlying point is it could be anything, but you need one. Because without that, what are you doing? You're just kind of listless. And people have asked me, well, okay, I get it. How do I? I get emails at least two a week now, still from the book, and the book's been out a few years now. How do I get it? How do I find a new passion? The only thing I've been able to figure out to say is try a bunch of stuff, try a
Right.
bunch of things, and see if one of them kind of rises above the others. And then keep doing that and see if that generates into a new passion. Everybody's capable of having a passion and should have one, but you got to maybe kind of find it.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I'd been doing health media for 25 years and I like it, but I was like, what am I passionate about? I was like, oh my God, I'm passionate about dogs. So I started dog eared and did that for a while. And then I'm so blessed to have joined with Bully Girl magazine and doing this podcast for them. And that gets me so excited because my passion is dogs. Now I'm still practicing healthy living. I'm just not talking about it anymore.
Well,
But I'm
you've
so much
got it.
happier.
I can sense by your eyes, by the way you're talking,
Yeah.
and you can sense that in people. There are some people that just seem deadened, and other people are just alive. Whatever
Yeah.
it is.
Right. Yeah. And loneliness is such a problem right now. And I'm just thinking about if you have a passion and you're doing it and you're just get in it, get in there because that can help too, even if you're by yourself, you know?
I'm almost a little bit concerned about this whole work from home phenomenon
Mm,
because you're not connected to the rest of the
right.
team. And I think some of the passion gets lost in that, some of the corporate culture, if it's a good culture.
Yes.
And you're just at home and you're staring at a screen all day, even though other people are on the screen. Maybe I'm a little bit old fashioned about this, but it's to me, that's a little bit the cause of what we've been hearing about these days, that people are a little bit more
Yeah.
depressed and maybe even worse.
Yeah. No, I think for me, so I have another side hustle, I guess you would say. And it's really nice because we do a lot of video meetings. So at least I feel like I'm seeing people but I know what you mean. There is something about being in person. I've worked on my own for so long from home, but I get to talk to exciting, wonderful people like you all the time. So it's great. I just love it. So Rick, again, I'm going to show the book. There's Emmy. Oh my goodness. What a cutie pie.
Yeah,
Tell
it's
us.
on Amazon. She's at the
Yeah,
top of a summit there in
it's
that cover,
it's just gorgeous. She's so beautiful.
and strong. She's got muscles on her muscles.
I'm sure. Well, how do we find you and your wonderful book?
It's on Amazon.
That's it? Do you have a website or anything? Are you on
Rick
social
Crandall.
media?
There's actually stories on every mountain climb, all 58 of them, on www.rickcrandall.net under the click of climbs. And there's photograph. They're not long, but there's some words and there's photographs. That's sort of word photos, stories. If anybody's interested in coming to Colorado and doing a climb, you can get the severity of each of them, which ones are easy, which ones are hard. You can get a feeling for what the routes are. All that information is in there. And these stories are written from the perspective of an average climber. And if it's possible to do with a dog, how to do it with a dog.
Well, Rick, you've been delightful. I really, really enjoyed this. And I hope people get the book. Again, The Dog Who Took Me Up a Mountain, How Emmy, the Australian Terrier, Changed My Life When I Needed It Most. Keep coming back to the Bully Girl Magazine podcast. We have so much great stuff coming. I'm really excited. And follow on social media at Bully Girl Mag and follow me at Lisa Davis MPH on TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram. And you'll get to see both of my good boys and us just living our lives and having fun. So thank you so much, everybody. Have a great day and keep coming back.